or about Pakistan?
From Pakistan to the missile strikes.
Pakistan has retaliated too. So it's not only India which has carried out 9 strikes. And they said that they have chosen 9 sites of terrorist camps,
Right.
both on the Pakistani administered side of Kashmir, as well as in Punjab, where they feel or they think is the base of the terrorist groups, and 2 terrorist groups, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Pakistan, in response, has carried out also strikes across the border, killing about, according to the Indian reports, about 12 civilians. They also believe that they also claim that they have shot 5 Indian military planes, although there's no confirmation from India. But I'm reading some reports that there's been debris of some planes found in the Indian city of Srinagar in Kashmir. And so there's been retaliation which has been going on from Pakistan. So it's kind of escalated from both sides. Pakistan feels that it had no choice and it has to do it. But the narrative which has been around this issue has been very, very interesting. India, from the very beginning, says that Pakistan has been involved, Pakistan's army has been involved, and it is the Pakistan's army which has been supporting these particular groups which are responsible. Pakistan, on the other hand, says that this is an India's creation. This is all India has created this particular crisis, and it has nothing to do with the whole attack. And moreover, it's India which is responsible for creating problems in Pakistan, as it is supporting some of the terrorist group in the southwest of Pakistan called Balochistan. There was a separatist attack recently in the month of, I believe, April or early May, and where lots of soldiers were killed. Pakistan also claims that India has been supporting another terrorist group called Taliban, which is based in near Pakistan and operating from Afghanistan. So it's basically different kind of versions which are coming out.
Right.
So this escalation is a product of these 2 different interpretations.
This dispute goes back many decades. And so what does this do to that sort of uneasy peace that has been taking place? What does this escalation signify?
Well, as you say, this dispute goes back all the way to 1947, where both India and Pakistan have a different notion of where Kashmir lies. For Pakistan, Kashmir is a disputed territory, and people of the Kashmir state, where 94%, or the valley where the 94% of the population is Muslim, they should have a right, should have a referendum, and they should decide their future, where they want to be, whether they want to be with Pakistan, India, or be independent. India has claimed always that it's an integral part of India. There have been elections which have been held. So there was a secessionist movement, an armed insurgency starting in 1989, which India took care of it over the years. And there was a really kind of electoral process which had begun government. But with the arrival of Mr. Modi's government, everything changed. Mr. Modi changed basically the nature of the constitution. By changing the constitution, he removed the special status, which I call for the Canadian audience, a sovereignty association arrangement within the Indian constitution, where it gave the autonomy to the state of Jammu and Kashmir and said that India will only be responsible for certain areas, policy areas like foreign affairs, defense, communication, currency, that it removed that particular status. And not only removed that status, but it allowed a mobility of people from outside India, from outside Kashmir, to buy land in Kashmir, which was a very kind of very provision of the Indian constitution that only Kashmiri citizens could own property and have employment in Kashmir. So they removed that, and they also converted the state into a union territory. And so So since 2019, things have been, just kind of in a very centralized mode. India has had huge control, security control over the valley. Things have calmed down there. There's no terrorism there, but I can tell you that there's always discontent within the population. So some people said these people are, Pakistan trained terrorists who come there, but these terrorists had support from the local population. Somebody must, would clothe them, give them shelter, provide them ability to move around, and so there's an underlying tension in the valley. So in a way, this is a message to Mr. Modi that things are not normal in the valley. And so if he's been thinking that since, or he and his government thinking that since 2019 things have normalized in the Valley of Kashmir, everybody's supportive of Kashmir's association with India, things are not that way.
And the world is certainly watching, especially because both countries possess nuclear capabilities. There are calls from the UN, from China, from Russia, France, and Britain calling for restraint. What's the likelihood that there will be restraint? What do you see moving forward?
I do think that there is, I feel comfortable actually hoping for a de-escalation. And I'll give you the reasons for that. And first, as you mentioned, that all Western countries have come out and said, exercise constraint, try to resolve the problem through diplomatic measures. And you can see that the tone of the two countries have changed. India, when it did the strikes against Pakistan, is basically said that we are striking against the terrorist groups. We are taking care of these terrorist groups which have come and done the attack, but we are not attacking Pakistan and Pakistan's military. Similarly, Pakistan this morning, I believe, made a statement and basically saying that if India backs down, we will definitely wrap up this tension. So that's one. So I think there's no appetite in the international arena for another conflict. So, we have a couple of conflicts going on, really, really, really serious one. So there is no appetite for this kind of another tension in another region. And secondly, I think both India and Pakistan have to think about their own economic issues. India is, as like Canada, worried about the Trump tariffs, really figuring it out how to deal with it. India is the largest, United States is the largest India's trading partner. And so it has to deal with that issue. Pakistan, on the other hand, has not been economically well off. It has political troubles, economic woes, and only with the IMF's help this year that Pakistan has been coming out of dealing with economic issues. Inflation is being taken control of. Their GDP is beginning to grow a little bit. And so I think both countries can't afford a kind of escalation at this time. So in light of those two things, I think I'm expecting and hoping that this will be kind of died down.
All eyes certainly on this right now. Reeta Tremblay, always good to speak with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
Reeta Tremblay, Professor Emerita in Political Science at the University of Victoria. 12:18 now. This is BC Today. Well, today the Prime Minister met with premiers to talk about yesterday's White House meeting. And yesterday we asked you how you thought Mark Carney did. Robert writes, I wonder why we had this meeting. That's my vibe, because I felt it was just the president talking and sometimes about irrelevant topics. At that point in the conversation, what's the relevance? I was proud of our Prime Minister sitting there, probably wondering why he was there. And didn't interrupt when the president was repeating information that is rather questionable. I could tell from his shifting of his stance, our prime minister wanted to correct the president, but he resisted. He knew the consequences and played it safe. In a way, our PM kept cool and calm, asserted our sovereignty, boosted the president's ego, but also let the president ramble on. The president provided a lot of room for fact-checking, and it really isn't our PM's place. Though it would have given him a tough guy look, that would not have been a great thing. Jackson from Port Coquitlam has a different view. It's as if I watched a different presser. The softball was a 51st state rhetoric. The hardball was getting a word in at the end during Trump's usual tirade of what Americans don't need, lumber, etc. By the body language of Mark Carney, you can see he was trying to get a word in. Trump thanked everyone, Vance laughed, and it was over. That was his chance in front of the world today, and he struck out. Now I'm listening to Mark Carney, who sounds like he got his ball stolen. Anyone other than me wished we could go back in time a bit and redo the election? Thanks so much. And Kathy writes about Mark Carney mentioning he was looking forward to meeting Donald Trump at the upcoming G7 in Kananaskis. And she said that all these so-called world leaders need to remember they are on sovereign indigenous lands. Where is truth and reconciliation really at? $12:20 now. You're with BC Today here. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, school budgets around BC are strapped. From Kamloops to Maple Ridge to Vancouver and Surrey, funding issues are putting school jobs and programs at risk. Now, the Surrey Teachers Association and District Parents Advisory Council have launched a campaign to lobby their local MLAs to increase education funding. We're going to hear from them in a moment, and you can call us now too. How have school cuts affected your child's education in BC? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone or email bctoday@cbc.ca. Anne Whitmore is president of the Surrey District Parents Advisory Council and joins me now. Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Can you tell us about the situation in Surrey? I understand the district is facing a $16 million budget shortfall this coming year. What kind of impacts would that have?
You know, as we're hearing trickling impacts and some uncertainty about what it's exactly going to look like, they will be showing their full budget, I believe, next week at their board meeting. But already we've been given the heads up that they're practicing attrition, which means that any educational assistant who are vital to connecting students with disabilities and learning support needs into their education will not be replaced if they quit or retire next year. And so that's anticipated to be 40 to 50 FTE, which translates to more because none of those positions are full-time. We also have helping teachers and elementary grade band teachers that are being told that their positions are changing and they're being reallocated into the classroom. And so there's you've also heard about extended day, and we have more schools that are probably going to be headed towards that because of space capacity issues.
Certainly something that we've heard about in other districts as well. And a few weeks ago, there was a story about Surrey schools where students were having to share worksheets or use scrap paper, and that was because of a shortage of paper supplies. I mean, I understand that's been resolved now, but how did it get to that?
It's a little bit confusing as to what exactly is the situation in the classroom, and different schools have different needs and different uses of paper. You know, one of the things that's not being talked about is that with the shift in the BC curriculum, where we're not using set textbooks, where sometimes people would find books that their parents had signed in their name in the front of. So every single document that's created, unless it's, you know, using a text, is printed or photocopied, and so there's a heavy reliance on paper and technology. Unfortunately, in most schools, there isn't just the budget, and in fact, most districts are like this. There isn't the budget to keep up with technology for a tablet, you know, a current tablet for every student. And there's a heavy reliance on PAC fundraising to provide that technology in the classroom.
Right, which is something that you do. Let me ask you, I'll just put out the numbers once again, asking you, wherever you are in the province, what are the school cuts that your district has seen? How has your child's education been affected by budget constraints? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And you can just hit pound 690 on your phone if you like. Our email is bctoday at cbc.ca. My guest is Anne Whitmore, who's the president of the DPAC in Surrey. Can you tell us about your own child's experience? What has that been like?
Oof, you're gonna hit me right in the heart right from the get-go. So I have a child who has multiple disabilities. And so she has received support through the school district on multiple levels, seeing a speech language pathologist, having a shared educational assistant. So she's never had a one-to-one educational assistant, having learning support, and being part of groups run by a child youth care worker and social groups, that kind of thing. But I can say that that has scaled back drastically. This is the first year in her in elementary school career that she has not had an educational assistant in her classroom, and she has not seen the speech language pathologist, to my knowledge, this year. We asked for counseling support. We weren't able to access that until she was actually in crisis. And so it is extremely painful as a parent to watch your child struggling and trying so hard to keep up with peers, to navigate. There's been a shift in the Surrey School District around educational support. So unless your child is fully physically dependent, needing toileting and hands-on support, or is what they consider behavioral or a flight risk. There's no academic support that's prioritized, or social emotional support, or the things that, like, they're not even teaching, but taking, for example, a student who's in fifth grade that might be working at a second or first grade level and helping them with a worksheet that a teacher might have provided. So what that does is it leaves students like mine struggling to navigate, because their teacher, no fault of their own, she has a wonderful, amazing, kind teacher, the teachers are told, practice universal design and everything will be fine in your classroom. It's not fine. And so, there's a struggle as a parent, where we're advocating in the classroom and at the school level, and where we're told to go to the district, and then the district says they don't have the money, so go to the ministry, and the ministry then turns around and says districts need to manage their money better, and families are caught in the churn.
Right, and that's part of the comment that we've received from the ministry here. I'll go through it in a moment, but can you just clarify what is universal design?
So universal design is a concept that that the curriculum is presented in a way that's accessible to all students. So you'll have it. You might have a project that is adapted for different students and is presented in different ways, so that it's no longer, hey, we're doing page 47, all the odds in the math book. And it's reflective of what's happening in our classrooms. A few years ago, I was told in any class, you usually have at grade level and then 2 up and 2 down. So you're really having a 5-grade split. And from what just anecdotally, what I've observed, I think that's actually expanded quite a bit more.
Okay. Let's take a call from Allison in New Westminster now. Hi, Allison. Have you been affected by school cuts?
Yeah, so my daughter is in grade 1 right now. And even this year, she's needed some extra help learning how to read. Nothing major, but it was her teacher, who's wonderful, was very blunt about the amount of EA support, learning assistant support, that the school is able to provide at the current levels this year, and encouraged us to get extra support outside school. And I know next year it's going to be even worse, that not getting the support you need. So it really feels like it's moving into a 2-tier system, where kids that parents have resources at home to get them the support are going to thrive, and parents that don't have those resources, it's sad leaving these kids behind. They're only 6 years old, and setting up in this trajectory that they're not going to be able to keep up with other students.
And how do you know it's going to get worse next year, Allison?
New Westminster is losing 20 EAs next year because of these budget cuts.
What would that mean for your daughter then?
So that means, because she's just having some troubles, doesn't need an EA like some other kids do. That means that she's not going to get any support.
It's that in between.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what are you looking for? What do you think needs to be done when it comes to school funding then?
I think we really need to increase the school funding. We're already low compared to other provinces, and we're consistently having less funding for schools over time. It's been consistent cuts year over year. and like it's an entire generation that we're going to be leaving behind in terms of not giving them proper education and opportunities.
Allison, thank you so much for calling in.
Thanks.
Thanks for sharing your story. That's Allison in New Westminster. And we're going to take more of your calls on school funding issues, school districts strapped in terms of their budgets and what that means for schools. Some still deciding, as we heard in Surrey, they're going to be deciding next week what that looks like. And my guest, Anne Whitmore, is the president of the Surrey District Parent Advisory Council. We'll take more of your calls coming up after the CBC News Update with Michelle Morton.
Good afternoon. Here are the headlines from the CBC Vancouver newsroom. All 5 youth charged in connection with the swarming of a 13-year-old girl in Kelowna last year have now pleaded guilty. The assault was recorded on video and shared through social media. One attacker has already been sentenced to 2 years probation. The other 4 are awaiting court dates in June. Police say a woman charged with impersonating a registered nurse in BC has been arrested in Idaho. Central Saanich Police say she has now been returned to Canada and is in custody. She faces charges of fraud, forgery, and impersonating a nurse. Her next court appearance is scheduled for Monday in Victoria. And Emergency Information BC is reminding residents there will be a test of the province's emergency alert system this afternoon. The loud alert will be heard on TV, radio, and cell phones at 1:55 p.m. Every province and territory except Quebec will have their emergency alert systems tested today. Alert Ready says in a post to its website that regular testing provides officials with an opportunity to validate and improve the effectiveness of the system. In the local forecast, a mix of sun and clouds with gusty winds for today, a chance of showers, highs of 17, and a chance of showers for this evening with a risk of a thunderstorm, cooling down to 9 degrees. Now back to BC Today with Michelle Elliott.
I recommend no naps during that time when the alert is coming out.
Oh, that is
That's going to be a rude awakening.
Could you imagine?
No.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah,
No.
so stay awake and alert because that alert is coming. Michelle, thank you.
Anytime.
That's Michelle Morton in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. This is BC Today. Thanks for joining us here on CBC and lots more on today's top stories in your region. Here's what's coming up on the Coast.
Hi there, Michelle. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I'd love to tell you some of the things we've got lined up for On the Coast this afternoon. We are going to talk about trade and guitars. We'll hear from a Vancouver company that sells guitar components, which are being affected by the ongoing tariffs. Our money columnist, Bruce Sellery, is going to be here with his weekly column. And ahead of Mother's Day this weekend, we're going to hear about an organization called Mothers Matter Canada. They want you to nominate a mother or a mother figure that has made a difference to a family or to a community. And while we're on the topic of mothers and Mother's Day, is there something your mom always used to say? Maybe it's a catchphrase, maybe it's a little bit of wisdom that has stayed with you today. We'd love to hear about that too. So join us for On the Coast this afternoon between 3 and 6.
So many things come to mind, things that my mom used to say. She used to always say, for a while, when someone would call my house. And she'd say, for a while, meaning to hold on. But yeah, lots of endearing things that my mom used to say for sure. We are taking your messages to Mom for Friday here on BC Today. So you can call us, send your message to Mom. That's 12:30 on Friday. And you can email us now too. Just send it to bctoday@cbc.ca. Your message to Mom. If you want to add a picture of your mother in there as well, we'd love to see it. We'll air it all on Friday. This is BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott, and we've been taking your calls on school district budgets and possible cuts coming to your local school. In Surrey, they're concerned about budget cuts there, and the local school district is determining what that means and what that would look like for next year. And now the Surrey Teachers Association and the local District Parent Advisory Council have launched a campaign to lobby their local MLAs to increase school funding. So we're taking your calls too. How have school cuts affected affected your child's education, our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone or email bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest is Anne Whitmore, who is president of the Surrey District Parents Advisory Council. And when it comes to funding for districts, what we heard from the ministry today, Anne, is that the province has provided more than $1 billion to the Surrey School District in base funding and special grants, more than any other school district in the province. It is the fastest growing city in BC. And it talks about making education a top priority. And the next budget, 2025 to 2026, they say is the ministry's highest funding for districts ever. It is up to the local district to determine how that funding, that budget is allotted. They can't report deficit budgets as well. So what do you think is the responsibility for school districts to determine how to cut the pie, what pieces get the most and where those resources go?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to respond to the comment that, Surrey receives $1 billion more than any other school district. This is the ministry's own formula. So it is exactly the same as other districts. And in fact, other districts receive extra money for rural and remote areas and other things in order to offset some of the things that they're facing. So coming back and saying, well, Surrey, you receive the most money. Like, what is the deal? I like to give the analogy that the tallest person in the room probably has the biggest shoes. So because of our size, because we have almost double the amount of students in the next closest district, which is Vancouver, which I had no idea when I came here, like that's how big our district is. It's not really fair to come back and say, well, you get $1 billion. Like, surely you can solve your issues with that. If I said to my kids as they grew, if I said to my oldest one, well, you're the oldest, you have the biggest shoes. I know you've outgrown them, but like, so what? You have the biggest shoes. That's not actually equitable.
It's not enough to
And
keep up?
It doesn't meet the need, absolutely. So, if you look back at the year 2000 in comparison to the GDP of BC, public education received 3.3%. Today, we receive 1.7%. And the budgets are not adjusted to inflation. So I think at the projected funding for 2025-26 is about 1.1%, even though our inflation rate in 2024 is 2.6. So out of the gate, we're already behind. And, these are the things that are in smaller districts, they might be able to make some smaller adjustments in order to move. But when you have the economy of scale of what's happening in Surrey, while we can do some really innovative things, it just ends up magnifying that disparity.
Let's take some calls now. Once again, Laura in New Westminster. You're the PAC chair in New West, Laura.
Yes, hi. Thank you.
I see Anne waving right now, so clearly you know each other. All right, well, tell me what the situation in New West.
Yeah, we are a significantly smaller district than Surrey, but we, subject to the same funding formula and are facing around a $2.3 million shortfall in our district for around just under 8,000 students. So it's a different scales if you're going to compare Surrey to every other district, but we are all facing budget cuts that are going to impact students in the exact same way, impact to vulnerable learners who are losing EAs and teaching staff, and every other student is going to see the impact in their classroom when students who need that extra support to participate in their education do not receive that extra support. Those students are either excluded or they're going to take up other resources that are meant for everybody, so that the impact is felt regardless the size of your district or what your students' needs are. Of course, vulnerable learners are disproportionately impacted by these cuts. We're also in our district seeing loss of librarian time. Like this is the nuts and bolts of public education, right? So it's devastating to everybody across the board, across the province.
Librarian time being cut. And so what is your call then to your MLA, to the provincial government?
Yeah, we have been asking for our MLAs to step up and speak up and advocate for the needs of their constituents, the families in their ridings. Call on the provincial government, call on those sitting in positions of power on the Treasury Board, in the Ministry of Education, to make the changes that we need to see happen to not only the funding formulas, but the allocations given out for special funding needs.
Okay, that's an interesting point about funding formulas. Thank you so much, Laura. Dan is next now in Kelowna. Hi, Dan.
Hey, how's it going?
Fine, thank you. How are school cuts affecting you? Yeah.
We pulled our kids out of the school completely. My oldest, he's 12, he's autistic. My second oldest is 10, and he's physically disabled. He spends part-time in a wheelchair and has spina bifida, so he wears braces, and when he was in the earlier grades, he required full-time help. Basically, what was happening was, because our kids were both high needs, funding was directed towards them, but that funding was used to hire education assistants that were then assisting like multiple students and other people when they were supposed to be getting using their funding to help other kids.
Right.
Now, I don't think that that's a bad thing, but ultimately it left us in a position where my son, when he was in younger grades, was running away from the school. My other son, who is disabled, we pulled him out in grade 3 and discovered that he was completely incapable of reading despite having CEAs. So he is now in grade 4 reading at like a kindergarten level as we're trying to teach him. And by pulling their kids out of school, we're able to direct the funding as we see fit. So we're able to get a in-home CEA that helps our kids with their homeschool. They're a part of a online program that they go to once a week. But basically now we're allowed to use their funding as we see fit for things that actually help them and not have to split it up, which gives our kids a better education, and they're finally starting to catch up. Now we're in a lucky position where, you know, my wife is able to be a stay-at-home mom and homeschool our kids. But we had to make the tough decision of just saying, nope, this is not working for our kids. Our kids are falling behind. The school system really just keeps pushing kids through despite their, you know, inability to do certain things. The new grading system that's been around for the last, I don't know how many years, developing and emerging and super unclear. And as a result, we, you know, did not get a clear indication of what was going on with our kids at all. And that was the last straw for us.
Wow. Dan, that's something that we've heard about as well, is, you know, what that means for people who do have the means to pull out of the public school system. People have raised that issue too. Thank you so much for sharing your situation. Good to hear from you. That's Dan. Yeah, take care. Dan in Kelowna. Cheryl in Port Coquitlam. Hi, you have 4 kids through the school system, Cheryl?
Yes, I do. And as I'm listening to this, it just makes me really sad. I have one child who has already done school. He's 30. We have gone through Vancouver school system, Burnaby school system, and now we're out here in the Coquitlam school system. And I have watched over the years it just so deteriorated. And what makes me really angry is that I'm listening. I'm thinking, this is an education program. This is something that we in Canada are supposed to pride ourselves on. Like, I'm thinking, if other people are listening to how we fund our education system, like it's very sad. Like, we are relying on a lump sum given to each district based on how many kids they get in there, forget whether they have needs, and expecting them to balance it. And every year we get cuts after cuts after cuts. Like, we used to have 1 week spring break. Now we have 2 weeks spring break to save money. We've cut music programs. We've cut math programs. We've cut all kinds of stuff. And I've been on many PACs. Funding for computers, funding for this. 2 of my kids have special needs. One of them is about to graduate. He has Down syndrome, autism. He's nonverbal. I can remember back when we had, I understand you're saying, okay, the funding gets to the school for him, but they can do what they want with him. Like, they can, when COVID happened, all of our funding from our kids that needed the special needs, like I said, he's nonverbal, so he needs somebody. All of that was pulled and put into kindergarten because the kids coming in really needed it, and they needed the help with all those kids. But he didn't get the funding, and so that was very disturbing. I'm just so wound up because I'm thinking, we're doing this wrong. Like, we're so doing it wrong. They can predict and tell you how many kids are moving in the district, what homes are being made, blah, 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 but yet they can't figure out how much money to give to the schools. By the time my son's middle school here in Fort Coquitlam was finished, they're moving in. They're building 2 new portables.
Right.
Hello? Like, does that make sense to you? And then they say,
Yeah.
you know what? We can't have a deficit, so we're gonna cut.
Yeah.
We're gonna cut.
That's
Like,
the dilemma,
You
Cheryl.
never get them back.
Wow, Cheryl, you've brought up so many issues there, and I really thank you for, all being on a PAC, seeing what the challenges when it comes to EA's attention as well, and that funding and how it's distributed. Thank you so much for your call. Our last caller today is Randy in Vancouver. Hi, Randy.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah.
I went through the Vancouver school system, and now my child is in high school in Vancouver. I empathize with all your callers. I have been on elementary school PACs in the past, and I just found it, just a waste of time, because in the VSB's case, they just want to run out the clock and have PACs fundraise to cover budget shortfalls. And fundraising is good for extras, but now people are fundraising for the required and mandatory stuff. I'm middle class, live in Vancouver, and I'm now getting bills, and I call them bills. It's extra billing from the VSB to pay for workbooks for topics like mathematics. And, $50 here, $30 here, $25 here.
That adds up, yeah.
I think it adds up, and we can afford it, but I've just drawn the line on it and complained, and I'm escalating all this. And through my emails and escalations, I've discovered, I think, a big reason why the VSB can't control their budgets. In the superintendent's office, they have 4 associate superintendents, so basically deputy superintendents. They used to have 1. They have 2 executive directors of positions that used to be director level. And they have 7 directors of everything and 8 district principals. And I think, I'm not a human resource specialist, but that's millions and millions and millions of dollars a year that I think could be flattened out easily by 75% and have goalposts and performance standards for parents. And the last thing I'll mention is DPACs need standing in the province to be listened to by the Board of Education, not just placated and little special projects going on.
Randy, thank you so much. And we'll pursue that question of yours about whether there is that bloat at locally, specifically at the Vancouver School Board. Thank you so much for the call. Let's squeeze in Nicola. I just have a couple of minutes, Nicola, but you're the DPAC president in Kelowna.
I am. Thank you so much. I think I just wanted to say thanks to Anne for coming on and sharing all of this that's going on in Surrey, but it's impacting all districts across the province. And, the inflationary increase that affect every single one of us living in BC, in Canada, those inflationary increases are affecting our school districts as well. And so when the province is not funding for inflationary increases, it's very difficult for districts to meet the needs of students. They're having to whittle away the system, our public education system, perhaps the most important thing for our future, because of this underfunding. So, I think it's important for everybody in this province to know what's going on, to have clarity, and to talk to their MLAs about it.
Nicola, thank you. Another growing district for sure in Kelowna. And so where does your campaign go from here now locally in Surrey?
Yeah, I just actually wanted to comment because I know Dan brought up the topic of PACs and DPACs, and in Vancouver they have a pretty unique situation where their school board is very disregarding to parent input and especially to their district parent advisory council. DPACs have a standing in the School Act to advise a school board on education that's being delivered. And so there's some really significant issues there. Where we are taking this forward is we have tried multiple times to talk and bring this forward to the Minister of Education and Childcare. We get the same stock responses back. You get $1 billion. We've doubled our funding for inclusive education. Well, if that's the case, how terrible was the state that we were in before that? And so now we are taking our call to Premier Eby to fulfill election promises that were made. Like, not only are we not getting an EA in every K-3 classroom and a counselor in every elementary school, but we are actually getting less. That is not okay. And so we're asking Premier Eby and Finance Minister Bailey to prioritize our children, prioritize our future. And fine, we have budgetary issues. I think everybody in this province understands that, but we need a plan. We can't just keep throwing out numbers and having these very long, drawn out conversations by email that are separated by months. We need to have a clear plan. We need someone to take responsibility. And so we are holding rallies. New Westminster just held one at the minister's office. Kamloops is holding one in May 10th. Surrey is holding one at May 17th at Minister Begg's office. And then we are taking it to Victoria, to the legislature, on May 26th. And so we are saying this cannot continue. Children cannot bear the brunt of poor planning and underfunding.
Anne Whitmore, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having us and covering this important issue.
Anne Whitmore is president of the Surrey District Parents Advisory Council, and we did seek, again, a statement from the province, and this comes from the Ministry of Education and Childcare. They say the next school year, estimated to be the ministry's highest funding for districts ever, over $8.2 billion, including special grants going to districts, more than 50% more than in 2016 and 2017. It says districts are now receiving over $13,600 in per student funding because the province has been steadily increasing it. This is the highest ever. That statement coming from the Ministry of Education and Childcare. Certainly we'll continue to cover this story for you as school districts decide on their budgets in the coming days. 12:51 now. This is BC Today. Thanks so much for all of your calls there. I'm going to turn to the election now and the election results. The turnout showed more than 68% of eligible voters cast a ballot, the highest since 1993. We don't have the age breakdown of voter turnout yet, but pre-election polling showed most voters between 18 to 34 were planning to cast a ballot for the Conservatives. And in the student vote mock election, elementary and secondary school students elected a Conservative minority government. Well, we're joined again by our youth election panel. Thought we'd check in with them again. Cole Reinbold is Secretary-Treasurer with the BC Federation of Students. Jessica Moorhouse is an accredited financial counselor and host of the More Money podcast, author of Everything But the Money. Welcome back to both of you.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being with us. Cole, I'll start with you. We spoke with you both prior to the election, just days before the election. We talked about how cost of living was the biggest concern for Gen Z and millennial voters. How do you think that did play out in this election?
Yeah, I definitely think that youth issues were largely ignored during this election because all parties agreed that there is a cost of living crisis in Canada. But what they all missed was how this crisis specifically impacts young people. So think about the price of groceries, rent, living in general, but then imagine adding thousands of dollars of tuition and textbooks costs on top of that. That simply wasn't included in platforms. No political leader mentioned that. So while election day may be over, the cost of living crisis isn't, and especially for young people, we are dealing with it at a much more magnified level than the average person.
And for you, Jessica, how do you see the results or the election campaign itself reflecting that affordability concern among young people?
Yeah, so, I know last time we talked and I agreed that affordability across the board to young people, but also people my age in their 40s and even 50s or 30s, 40s, 50s, that affordability, cost of living is still front of mind. And it was interesting to see the voter turnout and, the seats that were taken in each province, I was actually, surprised in certain cases, especially British Columbia, which I think, predominantly is either a Liberal NDP. And we saw a big shift to the Conservatives. And I think just kind of looking around, looking online and some of the conversations being had, it was because I think they were maybe a little bit louder on what they could do with affordability, or they talked to some of those, I think, pain points and really kind of drew in some of those young voters. And I think also, too, what I've been seeing from young voters especially is they were looking for something different. They wanted change. We've been Liberal government for a very long time. And even though it's a different prime minister this time around, I think they were worried that it would just be, business as usual. We're not going to see anything different. So maybe we should look to a different party. So I thought that was actually pretty surprising, some of the districts that voted Conservative when, normally they, in past elections they didn't. So I thought that was very fascinating.
And so, Cole, there is now a Liberal minority government. What are the policies that you would like to see pursued then? What would you call on this government to do?
Yeah, there are three things that I would really like the federal government to focus on for young people. The first one that we already mentioned is cost of living. So wages haven't kept pace with tuition fees, rent, and basic necessities. The second one would be housing. So rent is sky high in British Columbia and across the country, and therefore security deposits are too. So young people are left with moving and staying put being absolutely unaffordable. And the last thing would be post-secondary education. So with the IRCC cuts that we saw last year, where international student study permits were slashed by the federal government, this has left institutions across the country in deficits. And so students are worried about the future of their institutions because we're seeing programs being cut, services being cut, or entire campuses closed. 80 staff being laid off is within the norm now. So what students are wanting to see is more federal funding to post-secondary institutions. And what really brings all of these three things together, cost of living, housing, and post-secondary education, is generational fairness. Young people want policies that give them the same shot at a secure life that their parents, their grandparents, previous generations enjoyed.
And Jessica, moving forward, I don't know if you saw the meeting yesterday between Mark Carney and Donald Trump. Of course,
I did.
You did. Okay, so many people did. Tariffs have been a priority for the Prime Minister. So I'm wondering, how you see that moving forward. How is that going to affect younger Canadians and how it's handled?
Gosh, yeah, it's affecting everybody. We're I think finally starting to see, definitely in the past month or two, the real life effects. I'm seeing a lot of people in my real life lose their jobs or get their hours cut because businesses are trying to kind of tighten up their budgets because of these extra costs. It's having a big impact on everything. So I'm interested to see what he's going to be doing. I thought that meeting with Trump was very interesting. He was very I think he's actually a pretty good partner in terms of he knew really what to say, what not to say, but he said what he needed to say, if that makes sense. And he really stood up for, us Canadians and really, made sure that the big message was that, Canada is not for sale. We need to stop talking about that. It's not going to happen. And I think that's why, especially going back to the election, there is a big turnout, I'd say, with like the older generations to Liberals, where, typically they might go Conservative because Carney has been so vocal about, Canada being, protecting its sovereignty. So, it was an interesting conversation. We'll have to kind of wait to see. It's too early to really say what will happen. I like to think of, this is a new day, a new change, new government. So I'm hopeful that there will be some positive change, because that's exactly what we need. Because a lot of people are very, very concerned, very worried, very anxious about what's going on with the economy, but also their personal finances. And so we really do need some positive change and some good news.
You see it on the front lines yourself, dealing with your clients. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Good to check in. Cole Reinbold and Jessica Moorhouse.